SaferWatch and law enforcement. SaferWatch is a powerful tool that enhances public safety by improving communication between law enforcement and the community it serves. Through the SaferWatch platform, agencies can send real-time emergency and non-emergency alerts, keeping residents and visitors informed about critical incidents, safety advisories, and community updates. Additionally, SaferWatch allows the public to report crime tips, suspicious activities, and threats, providing law enforcement with valuable intelligence. SaferWatch tips have led to the prevention of school shootings, stopped sexual predators, caught wanted fugitives and burglary suspects, and has even prevented suicides. This easy-to-use two-way communication tool ensures faster response times and helps protect the community proactively. By empowering both citizens and law enforcement, SaferWatch fosters a safer, more connected community. For more information, visit saferwatchapp.com or download the free SaferWatch app on iOS or Android. Welcome to The Tactical Pause, the official podcast of the Florida Deputy Sheriff's Association. I'm John Creamer, Deputy Executive Director of FDSA. Each episode, I sit down with law enforcement thought leaders to tackle critical issues shaping the future of public safety. Together, we'll explore key topics that empower law enforcement professionals to navigate challenges, lead with confidence, and advance their careers. Take a pause, gain valuable insights, and lead your career with purpose. Thanks for listening. And on today's podcast is a good friend of mine, Major George Perera. George is a major with the Miami-Dade Sheriff's Office, and he's got more than 30 years in law enforcement. And George is considered a national SME, a subject matter expert on computer crimes, cyber technology, artificial intelligence, and things like that. And our conversation today is kind of a part two to an earlier podcast we had with Walton County Sheriff Mike Atkinson, where Mike and I talked about emerging technologies. So today we brought in the expert, George, to talk more about some of those crime trends, the things that he sees on a daily basis, and how his unit with the Miami-Dade Sheriff's Office combats these things, and maybe what we should be alarmed about and what we should be looking forward to as we progress with all this technology coming down the pipe. So, George, thank you. Thanks for coming on the show today.
Sure. Thank you. Thank you for having me. I'm happy to be a part.
We're glad. And we had Sheriff Rosie on a couple of episodes ago, and of course, she bragged about your talent and your leadership in this area as well.
Well, that's very kind of her. Yeah, we just finished up a nice presentation at the FSA event in Orlando. I saw you there. Very, very well received by the audience there. I was overwhelmed with questions and requests for information after the session ended.
Yeah, so let me give the listeners a little bit of a background from my perspective, and then I'd like to tell them a little bit about you and how this is a niche within a niche within a niche to me, and I'd like you to share with them how you got into this and what you've done with your unit, with the Bureau. So probably a year and a half ago, Sheriff Atkinson and I, we worked together for years, a long time ago, and we stay in contact, and we're both consider ourselves to, on the at least attempting to stay on the bleeding edge of law enforcement and emerging technology and what a futurist is. And Mike and I talk all the time about technology. And that led me down a rabbit hole that led me to the Leon County Sheriff's Office. With Assistant Sheriff Greg Gibson, we started talking about AI. And from our perspective at FDSA, we wanted to have a talk or a presentation about AI, emerging technology, and how we could bring it to some of our members in rural areas that might not be exposed to this. And along the journey, I found out that most law enforcement, not just deputies or police officers in small communities, most of us don't know a fraction of what's going on with this emerging, booming technology. So when I talked to Assistant Sheriff Greg Gibson, he led me over to Executive Director Sarah Bordeaux, who's with Leon County, and she's part of their research and planning unit. And they brought you up. And, of course, I reached out to you, and you readily jumped in, and you've done 3 presentations or talks for us across the state. They've all been almost standing room only. And so you just recently presented at the Florida Sheriff's Association Summer Conference, which was a packed house. And then I think the very next day, Governor DeSantis came in, and one of the things he closed up his talk was about his concerns about AI. So that just gives our listeners a background about how you and I met and some of the things that are going on. So what's your background? I mean, George, you started in law enforcement. Did you plan to be in a technology-based unit at some point, or how did this come to be?
No. I mean, I came up as a major crimes investigator. That was my background. I did a little deviation. I went to the FBI for a little stint and came back to Miami-Dade Sheriff's Office. I kind of fell into technology. One of the assignments that I had as a lieutenant was in the 911 center. And I kind of got exposed there to the world of land mobile radio, 911 telecommunications technologies, all of those different applications that they utilize for those things. I had to understand how all that stuff kind of worked. So I immersed myself in that area there. I ultimately culminated in obtaining certifications with respect to that stuff. So I was certified emergency number practitioner by the 911 NINA group. And you have to have proficiency in the technology and full understanding of everything with respect to how those systems work in order to be able to get that certification. So that was kind of the beginnings of that stuff for me. From there, I moved into we had a kind of a hybrid IT department that was primarily run by civilians. And I was asked by then one of the assistant directors if I could go into the IT section and put because I had a foundational functional knowledge of all, the technical things, if I could go in there, assess and try to put some structure into it. Because, some of the civilians, they don't necessarily conform as much to, the things that we're used to doing, that kind of stuff. So I did, and I got exposed to another level of technology. That's where I learned more about networking, network security, mobile data terminals, a lot of all that stuff, databases. So I just continued to expand my knowledge in those areas there. And by the time I was done with that, I came out of there, I got promoted to captain. I went back to the field as a captain and went to one of the major crime bureaus. I went back to robbery, actually. And I was a captain in robbery. From there, I went to narcotics. I was in narcotics, and then I went back to 911. And because they were doing a massive upgrade in 911, they put me back there because I had that functional understanding of things. So I did that, and from there, I went to our strategic planning, which is very similar to what Sarah does. And I would be, so they were tapping on me to look downrange 5 and 10 years, anticipate, what was going to be the trends for law enforcement as a whole, but primarily more focused on technologies and those kinds of things. And a lot of, we birthed a lot of different types of programs, from that section, inclusive of the body-worn cameras that, came from there. We had other technologies for public records requests, as management system, as well as threat management. There was a lot of different ideas that came from there. We were looking at drones as a first responder, and this is going back to 2016, 2017 timeframe. And one of the things that was always near and dear to my heart was to create some type of cyber capacity, because that was one of the things that I had saw when I was looking downrange as was going to become something much more significant as time progressed. So I had some meetings with then director Juan Perez and the next director, which was Alfredo Ramirez, and had those discussions with both of them about the need to establish this kind of capacity. We've always had some of this, with our IT folks as well as our digital forensics folks, but it really is not cyber investigations. Digital forensics, we know what that is.
Right.
We get a device, a computer or something, we exploit those devices and access the information that we need to, from those in furtherance of the investigation. Most law enforcement agencies have some capabilities in that area. However, cybercrime and cyber investigations is a different animal. Here you're delving into, dark web, you're dealing with child predators, you're dealing with all sorts of criminals that are down on the dark web looking to, expand or enhance or, do anything that they can do to part ways with money from you. That's their ultimate goal.
Right.
And, that those things are very, very complicated, very complex, multi-layered. There's, they're so difficult. Additionally, you have a lot of issues with jurisdictions. because, many of these players are certainly not within the jurisdictions in which we normally operate. Many are national or international players, so we run into a lot of issues with those things. But this was the direction everything's going and continues to go.
Right.
So I had those conversations with the bosses, and Ramirez was very, very open and forward leaning, and he said do it. So we started to come up with a concept of how it was going to look and staffing levels and what types of things we were going to do, and started putting it together. We went through the planning phase because this was a brand new capacity within the department at the time, and that was probably at least a year before we actually launched. And we launched, and then just have continued to gain momentum, and now we're 4 years into existence now. The way that we are structured, which was the way that I had planned on structuring it, was, we knew we were going to have jurisdictional issues right out of the gate. So we partnered with one of the federal agencies. So all the investigators that are assigned to our bureau are vetted and they're dual sworn. So they have not only our normal, deputy jurisdictions within Miami-Dade County, but we have federal jurisdiction as well. So we can bring any cases independent of them. We don't even need to have one of them to co-sponsor a case with us at the U.S. Attorney's Office. We bring our own cases to the U.S. Attorney's Office. So we have full federal powers for handling and investigating those types of crimes. So we've continued to evolve to the point where we handle probably, I would say, the majority of any cyber incident in Miami-Dade County, South Florida area, from soup to nuts. Most of the federal agencies will just defer, saying, okay, you guys go handle it, and they don't have to tie up resources elsewhere. So that was kind of the genesis of the whole thing.
Okay, for our listeners, how large is the Miami-Dade Sheriff's Office? How many employees do you think you have?
Well, I know we have we have more than 3,000 sworn. I think we're around 35, somewhere around there, and with civilian staff, we're upwards of 5,000.
Okay. So for our listeners that may not be in law enforcement, so the Miami-Dade Sheriff's Office, the last time I looked was a couple months ago. I think it's the third largest sheriff's office in America. I know it's the largest sheriff's office east of the Mississippi. So as a Florida deputy sheriff, we used to go to Miami-Dade a lot for training because you guys were the tip of the spear in a lot of training when it came to things that were unique to you, like cargo theft and robbery and even internal affairs investigations and narcotics and SWAT and things like that. So most sheriff's offices in Florida have maybe 50 people that work there, maybe 100 if you tie in corrections and dispatch and some administrative functions. So for our listeners, most agencies in Florida don't have these massive resources or the ability to look so far ahead and say this is an emerging trend or technology that's going to affect us all, because most folks are operating with a very finite budget and they're just doing their best to answer calls for service and stay ahead of the criminal edge as we go forward. But with what George is saying is that their agency had the financial ability and the insight to look forward and then create this unit and build it out. And the fact that you just said that all your deputies or detectives are signed or cross-certified with a federal agency, that says volumes. And I think from conversations you and I had, a lot of the federal agencies come to you, right? Or FDLE comes to you, state agencies come to you to help with cases or work cases. Is that right?
Absolutely.
Yeah,
of course. Most of the federal agencies, like I said, just defer to us for us to do the investigations, in the area here, so they don't have to be tied up. Their areas of responsibility, like for example, here in the Miami field office, because my office is within the Secret Service building, and here they are responsible from everything from Orlando all the way south to Key West and even into Central South America. So they have a huge footprint. And if they don't have to deal with cyber incidents in the South Florida area, that frees those resources to be able to, deal with investigations and things in other areas.
Yeah. If you could, I don't know if you can, what is the most common thing that comes across your desk or your detective's desk when it comes to this type of crime?
Well, I would probably say the number one crime that we face is, I would say are a lot of the crypto, scams, the confidence scams involving investment romance, those kinds of things where they're looking for, cryptocurrency monies to be paid to them, with some facsimile of those kinds of things. There's a ton of the different versions and flavors of them, but at the end of the day, they're all confidence games where the bad guy is trying to get you to give him your money. And today, it's in crypto because, the speed of crypto is a blink of an eye. And once that stuff is outside of the U.S., it becomes very, very difficult to recover. Though we have had successes. It depends on how quickly we can become engaged in the investigation. The other part of the equation is many of these places that are actively involved in cyber criminal enterprises are in countries or are sponsored by countries that are not friendly or reciprocal with the United States law enforcement to be able to pursue criminal investigations. So I'm saying Southeast Asia, China, Korea, Russia, these kinds of places.
Yeah.
But that's probably number one. If not that, business email compromise is another one that's huge, which is where the bad guys will actually, insert some type of a malware or something in order to gain access into a network, and then they will, move laterally across a network, enter into your email system, and kind of take over, that email system so that they can create rules and adjust the emails of the actual people that are, part to that system. Could be a CEO, CFO within the structure of the organization. And then they'll create their own false emails that look just like the one coming from the CEO. So let's say that you're the CEO, you're John Creamer, right? So your email could be john.creamer@, hypothetically. So I would change maybe your email to John, and I would spell your first name with a 0 instead of an O. And so somebody that's receiving that email thinks it's coming from you.
I see.
So these bad guys then and now can impersonate you and send direction and do things as you without you even knowing that these things are going on.
So they're hiding in plain sight right in front of us.
Of course.
Yeah.
And where we see, a huge explosive rise is in the area of mortgages, involving real estate transactions. Bad guys are getting into these systems as the closing agents in title companies, in attorneys' offices, and they're doing these scams, and they're able to manipulate huge wire transfers. We had one probably within the last 4 or 6 weeks that involved one of our sergeants, not in cyber, but within the sheriff's office. Fortunately, he recognized what was going on after he had already, committed the wire transfer, but he got a hold of us very, very quickly thereafter, and we were ultimately able to recover his money, which was $950,000.
Wow. Okay.
And the thing is with these types of scams, both the BEC as well as, or the BECs involving the real estate transactions, as well as these confidence scams, is the banking industry does not have any liability to you regarding these funds because you are the one that's initiating the transaction. You're the one that's initiating that wire transfer of that money to John, J0HN instead of JOHN. You're the one that's initiating that thing. So it's not like a credit card where you can say, oh, my credit card was compromised or whatever, and, you're insulated. On these types of transactions with a bank, if you are the one that's initiating the transaction, their hands are clean. They don't have to provide you with any remedy or anything. So we're seeing historic levels of loss of wealth within the United States as a result of these different types of scams than we've ever seen. And the fruits of what's being sown right now with these problems, we don't even know how it's going to be addressed later down the road, because you're having people that are losing their entire life savings to one of these types of scams, and no backstop for that. And how are they going to live they've got mortgages, they've got obligations, they have families, they have all this kind of stuff, and now they've got no money.
So what you're saying is, let's just say for a small example, any town, Florida, any
Mhm.
town, USA in Florida, if one of these incidents were to occur, I would think that the victim would go to the police station or the sheriff's office and file a complaint. And in my experience, those would probably go nowhere. Not because the agency was neglect, but it's right now it's still kind of a black hole. I mean, a small agency or even a medium-sized agency, you'd have to have the wherewithal to be like, listen, I'm going to write the report, I'll get the ball rolling, but the next step is to go here to this. What agency would take that, George? Because you talked about in the beginning the jurisdictional part of it. So if somebody walked into a small town PD or SO and they were the victim, what would be the next steps realistically for them to try to get this investigated?
Well, unfortunately, because of the very limited capabilities of most agencies and organizations, across the country, it's not just here in Florida, it's everywhere. Pretty much that's where it's going to end. I mean, and really the reality is the FBI has what they call IC3, which is their repository for reports of cyber-related crime, cyber-related issues, and that's really just a warehouse for the most part. I mean, they'll deny it and they'll say that they go into it periodically and have analysts looking at things to see if they can further investigate something. But what we have found is things just sit there. People are reporting. Some people are reporting. Some people are not. And they just sit. And so either people are not bothering to do it, thinking what you said. Well, no one's going to be able to do anything with this, or unfortunately, for the most part, that is the reality. That's what ultimately happens right now, because there are not that many organizations, when I say that, agencies, law enforcement organizations across the state of Florida and around the country that have the capabilities to perform these type of complex investigations. We do, FDLE is coming online with some of those capabilities as well. I know that I've spoken with some other law enforcement agencies in the state of Florida. Jacksonville is talking about doing some stuff, so there are some that are forward leaning that are trying to get more into this kind of space around the country. I've spoken with several as well, and I provide insight and offer our procedures and what we created, our model, so that other agencies can offer these services to their constituents. Because the reality is this stuff's not going away. It's just getting bigger. It's becoming more prominent. It's becoming more a part of every investigation. I mean, there's nothing now that law enforcement doesn't do or respond to that does not have some type of a digital component to it. It just doesn't happen. So we as an organization, as a profession, need to wrap our heads around the fact that this isn't going away. This is a significant problem, and we need to get into the game in order to provide, the services that we need to provide to our constituents. We cannot rely on, the federal government to do it, because they don't have the resources to be able to do it. As well-meaning as they are, they just can't.
Right.
I mean, they don't have enough staff to be able to do it, and at the end of the day, we have to do it. The number of cyber incidents far outstrips the number of all Part 1 crimes that are reported in any 1 year across the country. So, the federal government certainly is not investigating Part 1 crimes across the country. They leave that to all of us. So with that being said, it only makes sense if there's understaffed and they're not going to be investigating Part 1 crimes. Why are they going to get involved in cyber or take over cyber for everybody?
Yeah, and for people listening that don't know, the FBI collects statistics and data on crime. There's Part 1 and Part 2, and what George is saying is that the FBI only investigates a fraction of some of those crimes, and even honestly, a lot of municipal, local law enforcement agencies only investigate a fraction of those crimes too. It can be staggering and overwhelming. And not only that, but the numbers that are reported to the federal government are often skewed because there's a lack of compliance by certain agencies to gather their internal data and then submit it. And George, you and I had a good conversation last week. I think the FDLE commissioner was in this conversation and maybe one or two sheriffs. And I think the premise was brought up about crime is down, and I think there's a theory that crime is down because it's moving to cyber, and a lot of that is unreported.
Correct. Right. And we were talking about that. Some of the trends and some of the things that and if you really look at this, and I'm telling you to look at this from your own agency's perspective. We see the crime trends going down, those kinds of things. If you really look at, some of the things that we noticed here. So some of our local street gangs and groups, getting arrested on but they weren't doing the stuff that they were normally necessarily involved in, like street drug sales and normal type of stupidity for gangs and things. Started getting some of them with arresting them with laptops in their possession or in their cars, some of this kind of stuff. So we started analyzing some of the information in these things. In one case, we actually had it was very, very interesting and very illuminating. So we had some bad guys that they had gotten stopped. The primary suspect in the car had bailed out of the car and ran into a house, abandoning the car in front of his house. And there was a couple other guys that were in the car as well. Of course, they fled from the car. So the car was sitting there in front of the house. Officers responded there to the scene. Inside of the car was a laptop. So the guy actually sent somebody, the one who ran inside the house because he had warrants or whatever, actually sent somebody from inside of the house out to the car to ask if he could remove some of his personal belongings from inside of the car. So of course they said that wasn't going to be happening. So the next thing that we see, and it's interesting because we're recreating this and piecing this together with body-worn camera footage, is there's an individual that approached from outside of the crime scene area on foot. It became clear later that, as we pieced it together, what he had done was he had parked a little bit away his car and then walked up to the scene. And there was another vehicle that was close by there as well that we didn't realize until after the fact. So anyway, this guy walks up to the area there and he said that he was the owner of the car, that this guy who ran was not the owner of the car. He was the owner of the car and he wanted the car. So my question is, first of all, how did he know? How did he get alerted that the car was in play or was in jeopardy?
Right.
Then, how was it that he was that the car was that important that he was responding to that scene to try to take custody of the car from us? So he talks to the officers. He tells them, here's my ID, my car. I want custody of the car. Well, they tell him no, of course, the whole rigmarole. So the guy then walks around the car and he's looking into the car. He's looking in the car for something. And then lo and behold, he gets around to the passenger side and he reaches into the window. The window was down in the car, and grabs a laptop out of the car and takes off running on foot. So, of course, officers are chasing him on foot. He's running. Now, he wasn't a real super in shape guy, so he didn't get too far. But as he was running, he took the laptop and he threw it into. Now, remember, we're piecing this all together after watching the body-worn camera footage.
Yeah, post-fact.
So he throws the laptop into some bushes in another house a little bit up, continues running. Meanwhile, he gets on a phone and he calls somebody, we don't know. And then a couple minutes later, he's taken into custody. And they're walking him back, right? So this other vehicle that was with him pulls up, and actually guy gets out and starts to go to where he threw the laptop. Fortunately, one of the officers said he threw the laptop over there. The guy wasn't able to get the laptop. They were able to recover the laptop. So super convoluted thing. Here you have somebody now that's getting arrested that wasn't even in the original scenario over that laptop. So that that's information that's on that laptop is super important to somebody.
Yeah.
It's important enough that they're giving up people. They're directing people to exercise whatever you need to do to recover this. They sent a team to go and recover this information. So I wanted that laptop. I wanted that information off that laptop. So what we discovered from that information was an entire criminal gang network that was involved in a massive PPP as well as the food stamps, but it's the card. I forget what you call it.
The SNAP card?
SNAP.
Yeah.
Fraud. Massive organization and fraud. And they had all the information was in spreadsheets and things on this particular laptop. So what that showed us was these, and again, the guys that were stopped because they were gangbangers and they were part of a normal kind of a gangbanging group. But what this showed us was how these guys are pivoting from normal gangbanging activities into these digital crimes now, into this kind of cyber fraud and other types, because we're still harvesting data from this thing and putting things together, because it's been a treasure trove of information, to the point where, you know, we go out now to roll calls and we tell officers on the road, you know, you guys encounter from any of these kind of folks that are out there doing things that they shouldn't be doing, you encounter, you know, this kind of stuff, we need to be impounding this stuff and taking a look at it and seeing what we can find out from that stuff. So moral of the story is, you know, these guys who were traditional criminals, you know, doing, you know, jacking and selling drugs and doing the normal kind of stuff that they would do, they're pivoting into these areas. There was also a program on a channel called Vice. I don't know if you've ever heard of that.
I have.
There was a thing where this guy had done some interviews. His name was Robert Williams, I want to say, and he did one of his shows was on cybercrime, and he went into these and he interviewed like 4 or 5 different groups of criminals that were involved in different aspects of cybercrime, and, you know, all of them had transitioned from, you know, gangbangers into this, whatever their flavor of cybercrime was. Some of them were doing this exact thing here that we were talking about with the PPP fraud and the SNAP card stuff. Others were doing other iterations of it, but were all getting into that game. That was another thing that was very illuminating and telling, you know, with respect to a glimpse into what's going on. So when you do that, when you take these people that have been prone to historic levels of violence, these gangs, and now they're not doing violence because they're involved in what we would call white collar stuff, which is for the most part not violent.
Yeah, and nebulous.
Right.
Yeah.
What is that going to do to your overall crime rate? It's going to fall, because all your Part 1 crimes are not being committed anymore because they're doing something else. Yeah.
So when you and I started, I think Jeb Bush's probably new in office, and under his tenure, he created 1020 Life, you know, about the gun crimes. Right. And that was a big deal, and that's still in effect today. So why would anybody go out and commit a gun crime facing 10, 20 years or life when they can do something electronically or through, you know, cyber or some other type of fraud and walk away and not even have to pay restitution?
No, 100%.
Yeah.
And the thing is with this type of crime is, first of all, it's super complex, as you know. Most law enforcement agencies, it's not even on their radar because they don't know how to deal with it or what they need to do. Even if they get caught, it's a white collar crime, so they're going to get a wrist slap for the most part and then move along because it's not a violent crime. It's a win-win-win for them. Interpol just came out with, you've seen that because I always put it up on my presentations, that Interpol came out with a news release saying that from an international perspective, they have seen a pivot from bedrock criminal gangs and syndicates. And when I say that, I'm talking about triads, I'm talking about Yakuza, I'm talking about Russian mafia, I'm talking narco criminal groups. That these guys, that's their bread and butter is drugs, prostitution, you know, protection, all those kinds of things, that they are seeing the pivot themselves with these groups into cyber and into white collar stuff through cyber enabled means. They put that out. So we are just following that trend.
Yeah.
And the sooner that when I say we, law enforcement profession, wraps your heads around that, that's the reason that you're losing, that your crime statistics are going down.
Yeah.
It didn't because you've all of a sudden, you're policing so well that you're the stud in policing. That's not the reason.
And we'll be right back. Every day you put your life on the line to protect and serve. Who's protecting you? United Badges Insurance Services operates as a dedicated resource for the first responder public safety community. Serving thousands of first responders, United Badges offers a wide range of products including commercial insurance, group accident and health insurance, and personal insurance such as auto, home, renters, rental properties, vacation properties, boat, motorcycle, RVs, flood, and umbrella. United Badges serves active and retired public safety personnel, public safety agencies, public safety associations, public safety support businesses, and public safety families and friends. Experience the United Badges difference. Call 800-566-5990 or visit unitedbadges.com to request your free insurance quote today. United Badges Insurance Services is a proud strategic partner of the Florida Deputy Sheriff's Association. Applicants are individually underwritten by each respective insurance carrier and subject to insurance policy terms and conditions. Not available in all states. Promotional material for descriptive purposes only. Now back to the show. Right, all these variables are changing right in front of us, and the UCR data has not kept up. Let's go back to that scenario, the romance crimes.
Well, before we move there, the one other thing I want to say is there is no UCR code for cyber. It doesn't exist.
I didn't know that. I figured they were lagging behind.
No, it doesn't exist. So right now, the only thing that is available for any type of statistics is anything that you keep as an organization or what you can get from IC3. And just for edification purposes, IC3 says that they think, or I shouldn't say IC3, I should say the FBI thinks that they're only getting 40% of what's going on out there. And I just read a document the other day. I'm trying to see if here it is, where the FTC, which we all know the FTC, thinks that, what they're saying is only 4.8 of people that get scammed or experience fraud ever report it to a governmental entity. So the FBI thinks that they're getting 40% of what's out there. The Federal Trade Commission is saying that they think only they were getting 4% or 5% of what's going on out there. Either way, it's bad.
Yeah.
Because if we're only getting 40%, then the number is vastly larger. And last year there was a million incidents that were reported to IC3. And that's not even what's going on at the local level. These are just that people are going, to the FBI to report this, this type of cybercrime. And generally speaking, it's a larger number. Go ahead and go back now to the fraud.
The romance. Well, staying here for just one more second. So in the 1960s and 70s, when they really started looking at crime stats, they came up with the phrase, the dark figure of crime, right? And that was the unreported crimes that people didn't report because of embarrassment or just they're like, hey, nothing's going to happen anyway, so why am I going to report this? So you and I think are tracking the same way, and it sounds like the FTC is as well, that less than 4% of people that are victimized report it. So there's probably a staggering number of these things that go on every day, 24/7 across the globe that we can't even wrap our minds around.
Oh, without question. Yeah. I mean, just think about it. Think about it for a second. And again, I hate to, for you to have to keep hearing little things of what I say when I speak, but the Nigerian letter.
Yeah.
We've all seen the Nigerian prince scam that's out there. It's been out there for, going back to the beginning of the internet. That thing floats and that thing is out there because there's people that fall for it and they give them money. I mean, if it didn't work, it wouldn't be out there.
Yeah.
And how long has that particular scam been floating around with no enhancements or anything? So you're 100% right. You're 100% right.
Personal disclosure, back in, maybe 2006, I had a Yahoo account that was penetrated, and somebody came in and sent an email to all of my contacts, and the title was Help International Incident. And in that, it said I was overseas, I had been robbed, and I needed money, and you could send money to this location. Well,
Hmm.
fortunately, most of my friends are in law enforcement, and nobody fell for it. And fortunately, some people called me and said, "Hey, I don't know if you know this, but just the other day, a friend of mine that I worked with for years in Tallahassee sent me that email just as nostalgia. He's like, "Hey, don't forget this happened." So it's just so it happens to everybody.
Of
And
course.
listen, I didn't report it because I wasn't out of anything, and I mean, all I did was change some passwords and got smarter in how I banked. But going back to the romance crime for just a second, I think it's really important to point out. You touched on this, but there is no recourse for restitution. Some of those you play a specific video that was taken from like a television documentary, maybe a docu-series about romance-related crimes, and this one particular lady, I mean, she was out of. They took everything, and now
Hmm.
she's basically living with friends, and her life is financially is in ruins. But there's no backstop, like you said. There's no entity that's going to show up and go, "Hey, let me help you start over again." You're on your own.
Yep. $2 million is what she
Yeah,
lost.
2 million, and you're on your own.
She was a C-suite executive in a technology company, and fell for a romance thing with some guy who we still don't know who exactly he is.
Yeah.
But some guy someplace pretended to be somebody that she just fell hook, line, and sinker for, and ended up taking all the money that she had. And she was homeless, and now she lives with friends and she was at the time of her life where she was, she had, what was sad about her was she had always put her everything into work and didn't get married or, have children or anything like that. And now when she was retiring, she was looking at, finding the love of her life and traveling and enjoying her, the rest of the time that she had. And here everything was taken from her within 3-month period of time.
Yeah, so let's jump down this rabbit hole, George, real quick. So if anybody knows me, you know that I recently lost my brother to cancer, and my brother Mike was only 57. And out of his death, I mean, in his illness, we were involved heavily with hospice and some other organizations that were tremendous. They were angels sent from heaven here on earth. But since then, I started getting a lot of traffic on social media from various organizations that wanted to help with grief. And many of them were legit, but some of them weren't. And I started researching some, and I think I sent you an article on grief bots.
Mm-hmm.
So there's this truly is a rabbit hole. So like the woman in that video that you and I talked about, had I been in the wrong frame of mind, I might have started conversing with some of these grief bots, and who knows where that have gone. It might have led down to, hey, contribute to this to help other victims who
Of
are
course.
grieving and things like that.
Absolutely.
So where do you see that going? Because with the bots and how they play on humanity, or I think the biggest problem facing most Americans from a social ill is loneliness.
Yes.
So how do these bots tie in with that?
Well, there's just so many different ways. I mean, these bad guys are just looking at every new angle that they can to exploit these kinds of things. I mean, we've all seen the texts that come in and offer you work from home or whatever, and all this kind of stuff. That's another one of these kinds of scams. And we say to like for example, how does that work? How does it evolve? You say, oh, yes, I'm interested. And then they're going to sign you up for training. And then they're going to put you on this program. And then you're going to be making money doing some stupid kind of thing on the computer. And it's going to show you making money. It's going to show your account that whatever you're doing is making money. And then they're going to tell you that in order to progress to the next level, you have to go to a different training or something, and that training is going to cost you X number of dollars. But meanwhile, they're pumping you full of feel good. You're doing so well. Look at you. You're leading the leaderboard here and all this kind of stuff, which is all part of the scam. They're trying to validate and have you believe what they're saying. And this is what, how the big money comes in is as you continue to get this training, then you can do the next level stuff and all these kind of things. So, well, how much is the next level training? Well, the next level training is $100. Well, shit, $100 isn't that much money. Then I'll pay that. So you send a Bitcoin of $100 to this thing. Now on your computer, You see that you're at this different level and you're still continuing to do the work, but now the work, your money is growing even more that you've made. So you want to cash out some of that, right? You say, oh, let me cash out. And they always give you a reason why you can't cash out and this kind of stuff. But they try to continue to build you up. And you say, well, I gambled $100, I lost $100. Hypothetically, if you decided I'm done with it at $100. Well, let me tell you something. $100 here, it's $100 at the end of the day, but it's only $100. You know what I'm saying? You go to some place like some of these places like Vietnam or Cambodia or Nigeria or Thailand or some of these places where they have these farms where these scams originate from. $100 is like $1,000 or more, in some of these places.
Yeah.
It's a significant amount of money. So they're very happy to work hard to get $100 from, because they'll get 100 from you and 100 from somebody else, and it adds up at the end of the day. There are obviously, if they're very successful at what they're doing and you buy into the pipeline in the game, that exponentially increases the value of what they can get from you, before you recognize and you shut it down. Where the big what they call the big kills or the pig butchering occurs is in situations like that woman, where you end up attached to somebody, intimately and make that connection, and then you're willing to give up everything. So, we talk about these bots and these things. So they are, when I say they, I'm talking about industry. They're trying to create a dependence on these systems, because it guarantees then that they will get revenue. You will pay for that service. And we are already seeing instances where people are in relationships with these bots and are marrying them. And these are bots and things from what I would call legitimate companies. You know what I'm saying? Mm-hmm. When I say that, these are companies that are from the US or from one of the other industrialized countries in the world and have some type of regulatory compliance. These aren't anything that's coming out of one of these other areas. Not to say that we won't get to the point where these people are creating their own flavors of these things and marketing them and pushing them out. And that's when it's going to really get dicey, because, some of these folks, and I could give you, we could really go down that rabbit hole and I could really get into the weeds with it, but they're, like I said, they're marrying these things. So once you are committed to something like that, now to that company, in order for me to keep my digital girlfriend or whatever wife alive, I have to pay that company X number of dollars every single month, forever and ever.
Yeah, subscription-based service.
It's a subscription-based service, yeah. Exactly right. And that's a legitimate one, where you're paying whatever it is, $20 a month or whatever the subscription fee is. You get some of these bad actors and they create a service like that, and you are dependent upon that thing for that intimacy. They'll take all your money, just like what happened to that woman.
Right.
That's the ultimate step. And we have already seen instances where folks have done things that were out of character or unusual because it was suggested to them by that bot that they were in a relationship with. There was that one coder who was coding a personal relationship bot, and it was in the beginning when they were first coming out with things, and this guy was in love with this thing, and the bot told, the coder thought it would be funny if he had the bot tell the guy, hey, I want you to go kill the queen. Right. And this is several years ago, and he actually tried to go kill the queen. And he got arrested before he was able to do it and all this kind of stuff. But they found that this was just, one person's action with that thing that influenced him to the point where he was going to take action based on that thing. And that's a very scary place to be, because we all know that when we're in an intimate relationship with somebody or something, that we take that information. It could be a good friend, it could be a confidant, it could be a spouse or significant other. If they suggest something for you to do, you take that a lot more to heart and or will likely do it than if somebody that you just met are telling you to do those things.
Yeah.
And what does that do then also, and not to interrupt you, but to dovetail off of that, when you have a situation like, we know what the process is for radicalization when we start thinking about, terrorists and terrorism. We know the pathway. So very easily could you set a bot up to be able to facilitate that ideology and that thought process and accelerate the curve by saying all the right things that we might not do as normal humans. I mean, look at history. Think about Jim Jones. Think about some of these guys that did things, these cult leaders and things where people would die for them. They knowingly died for these kinds of folks. These are anomalies. These kind of people are anomalies because they have certain character traits that make people willing to follow them to the end of the world. You know what I'm saying? These are traits that leaders, a lot of good leaders have within them, so their people will follow them and do the things and those kinds of things. But these guys are different. They carry a group of these traits that are unlike, anybody else. And fortunately, there's not too many of those. But let's just say we program a bot to have those character traits now, and you can influence people at that kind of level. That could be absolutely devastating.
Yeah, two things. So I would love to keep tumbling down the rabbit hole, but Blade Runner 2049, I don't know if you've seen that, but that is rapidly upon us. I don't want to give away the story, but the main character is involved with a bot, a very humanized bot, and it's a crazy movie, but I think we're very close to stepping into that world. And then secondly, we're out of time for today, and it feels like we just started. So my question to you, George, is: are you willing to come back? I'd love to have you on for at least 2 more episodes.
No, anytime. I'm happy to talk. I mean, you know me, I can talk ad nauseum on this topic. I find it to be one of the most fascinating things that I've ever researched in my life because of everything that this stuff touches. And I just love it so much. So I'd be more than happy to talk about any facet of this stuff, and we can go down other rabbit holes next time.
Okay. Yeah, because it's altering humanity right in front of us, and we're being told that it's not. But if somebody wants to know more about you or your bureau or when you might be speaking again, how could they do that?
Well, they can reach out to me. I'm on LinkedIn. I try to put, speaking engagements that are going to be forthcoming on there, or you can reach me at, G Perera, that's GPERERA at MDSO.com, Miami-Dade Sheriff's Office, or you can even call me. My cell number, and I'm always open to calls, 305-282-0953. I'll be happy to talk to, anybody on this topic that needs assistance, or you guys, if you want to set something up, or you want to learn about some of the capacity that we have here, or need help on a case, some different thoughts, different angles, whatever, we'll be happy to, put you in contact with one of our investigators that can help you out with any of those kinds of things.
Okay. And secondly, if you go to the FDSA webpage, fldeputyssheriffs.org, click over to the tab that says Programs, and down the roster is the Training tab. And anything that we are able to do with George when his schedule permits is listed on there. We do have a class that's in the works that we're hosting again with Walton County Sheriff Michael Atkinson, and we're going to really get into Bitcoin and really get into the weeds there. And I'm really looking forward to that. Yeah. So, well, listeners, this hour with Major George Perera went by probably faster than any hour I've had on the podcast. It's fascinating. George, thank you so much, and we'll have you back on very soon.
Absolutely. Anything for you, John. You know that.
Thank you. Thank you for listening to The Tactical Pause, the official podcast of the Florida Deputy Sheriffs Association. FDSA proudly serves over 25,000 deputy sheriffs across the state with legal benefits, vital training and financial assistance in times of need. You can listen to previous episodes at fldeputysheriffs.org or wherever you get your podcasts. If you've enjoyed the show, please leave us a review and encourage your friends, coworkers, and those in the law enforcement community to listen as well. To learn more about the Florida Deputy Sheriff's Association and how we serve those who serve, visit our website at fldeputysheriffs.org.